So I think we can probably get started with just some of our housekeeping and our announcements. I would like to just thank our sponsors for making this series happen. We are hosting webinars the entire summer through mid-September, every single Wednesday. And it's because of our wonderful sponsors and partners that we're able to make that happen. So that's Vote HOA Now, it's Care Construction, City Quiet Windows and Doors, Easy Management, the Falcon Group, let's see, Hotwire, K Bender Rembaum, Nouveau Florida, Oracle Profitability for all of our folks. If anyone is joining us from Arizona, I know most of you guys are from Florida, but through our partnership with Oracle, we've invited some fantastic folks from Arizona to join us and take advantage of this amazing content. The Paving Lady, Plashridge Insurance, South State Bank, United Professional Engineering. And with that, I will turn it over to Carmelo.
Good morning. Thanks. Thank you, Marielle. We'll get it going here. Yes, this presentation is on concrete restoration. I've also added phase 1 and phase 2 inspections, recertification inspections. This is actually a 1-hour class plus. It's not 2 hours, so I think that was a little bit of a typo. It will probably go over a little bit over an hour, but I try to keep it, it's a packed 1-hour presentation. Again, it's basically what I just said. Phase 1 and 2 inspections of concrete repair. Does not focus on legal matters and reserve studies. We do just a quick intro as I'm doing now, get into recertifications, inspections, then we get into basically the 4 phases of the repair project, build the initial assessment and testing, a project manual, procurement phase, and then we get into construction admin and inspections, and then if we have time, we can go over some repair examples. We'll do Q&A during the presentation. So just post your questions, and the moderator will ask me periodically. We'll go over those. Just a quick background about me. I have a engineering degree, civil engineering from the University of Florida back in '99. Got a PE license with a structural focus. I'm also a licensed special inspector. I've got the full SI license, not the limited. Also a licensed general contractor. Got special training in construction document technology through CSI, the Construction Specs Institute, and then way back as building inspector license when I first started in structural masonry. I am the 25 president-elect for the State Florida Structural Engineers Association. I was also the state president in 22, and I've been on the board or locally of South Florida and Palm Beach's chapter since '08. I was involved with Surfside Working Group. That was a great experience, and I'll talk about that in the presentation. And I'm also somewhat involved in there's Engineering Florida, there's a new magazine that FES puts out. Get a little bit more background. I actually grew up doing construction with my family, so I've got loads of experience hands-on doing concrete, steel, hand framing, etc. It's just tremendous hands-on experience. Again, since this needs to be updated, I have 25 years now of experience in structural and parallel with restoration, concrete repair, same thing. And again, I've done design of threshold buildings, been prime professional in projects, and also I do some construction management on my own stuff. Okay, so let's start with a bit of history about building recertifications. They happen through failures. So we had the Miami-Dade County program was established in the '70s, and Broward County established theirs in '05. This was modeled after Miami-Dade's program. These were failures. This is actually from Broward County's recertification program. There were some failures that occurred. I just updated this. This is Broward County's recertification form. This is their regular, I guess, boilerplate form that needs to be completed. In addition to this, a Word document type letter or report is presented with photos, etc. Miami-Dade has something similar, and we are now seeing The state put out something similar to these, or that was modeled off of these. I don't have that yet in this slide group, but the state is slowly getting up to speed on things. The phase one is a kind of a watered down inspection, so it's kind of a quick look. This is kind of an example of what we do is modeled off of Broward County system, and we look at the walls, the masonry walls, roof systems, etc. And then we just, note whether it's good, fair, needs repairs, etc. Again, the phase one is supposed to be a simple, watered down, quick look at the building to see if there are repairs or not. As you all know, back in 21, we had Champlain Tower South, and it really changed lots of things in our world. Unfortunately, that collapse occurred. Again, I was actually happened to be state president at the time, so it was right at the table of conversation. I was invited into Surfside Working Group. It was started by Florida Engineering Society and the American Council of Engineering Companies. They brought in FSEA, which I again was state president, International Contract Repair Institute, the building officials, civil engineers, and even the architects were brought into the conversation. Basically, try to summarize this real quick. It was the original Senate Bill 1702 was modeled off of Surfside Working Group's white papers. It's basically everything that was in the bill was in the paper. Again, it was started by these two entities. When we got together, we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. It was to just put down on paper what Miami-Dade and Broward were doing, and maybe add some more things to make things better. In other words, additional recommendations. At that time, we recommended a 20-year milestone inspection cycle, and then 7 years thereafter for coastal properties. There's multiple reasons for that. The 20 years when we might start seeing damage on buildings, 15 to 25 years, and the 7-year cycle was related to paint cycles and tying in the need for staging to do repairs of paint cycles, which made a lot of sense. And then these were for coastal properties, right? 3 miles within the coast. That's where the 3 mile came from Surfside Working Group's conversations. Okay. And then all other properties inland were 30 years and 10 years thereafter. Okay. We created a phase one and phase two inspection. The phase one was supposed to be exactly or very similar to what Miami-Dade and Broward were doing. It's just another way to say 40-year inspection. Okay. And then if the phase one failed, then you go to a phase two. Okay, that was the intent of Surfside Working Group, and I'll talk more about this in the presentation and how that got changed through the legislative process by, in my opinion, people that didn't really, excuse me, understand the intent between the phasing of the inspections. This was also recommended that we do 33% of the units entered for the phase one, the recertification inspection. That's another important point. I know different engineers weren't doing that, and they still aren't. They're doing, it's kind of all over the place a bit. Again, the sequence of law change. Champlain Towers South occurred. Surfside Working Group was formed. Senate Bill 1702 was created based on Surfside Working Group document. Then the House and the Senate went back and forth negotiating what should be in the bill, and then SB 4D was created. Okay, and then the state statute 553 899 was created off of the Senate bill, and now we have a chapter 18 of the Florida building code, the existing building code, which all this stuff is in the law. Basically, this chapter is going to be more for the engineers and the contractors, but they do it is based on 553 899. So that's kind of where we're at today. Let's see. The state is requiring a 30-year milestone, what 10 years thereafter. I won't get into too much detail there. This was actually pulled out of chapter 18, again, which was modeled off of the state statute. Condo has 14 days to notify the owners once the notice of required inspection is received from the municipality. I think most municipalities are on board with getting these notices out, but I imagine some aren't. Completion timeline for the phase one is 180 days after the owners receive the NOI or NRI. The completion timeline for the phase 2, if needed, is 180 days after submitting the phase 1 report. And the report distribution, they must be submitted to UNRS within 45 days after receiving the application inspection report. The applicable inspection report. And the repairs must be commenced within 365 days after receiving such report. This probably is negotiable with the building department. They understand that some projects take more than that. But that is something in the basically law now because it's in the building code. Well, here, this talks about it further. If repairs are needed, the building owner shall have a total of 180 days from the date of milestone inspection, unless otherwise permitted by the building official. And for deficiencies that cannot be covered within 80 days, this may be extended again by the building official, who has authority over that jurisdiction. Again, this is the state guidelines. These are the minimums. The municipalities can change that based on their own, the building official or the legislators can change that locally. This is a little summary of the timelines. Broward County is 25 years and 10 years thereafter. Same with Miami-Dade. Palm Beach County, I'm just getting updates on that. They just sent me a new form, which I haven't. They're using the state recertification form, but I don't believe they're at 25 years. I think they're using 30. The Boca Raton is 30 years and 10 years thereafter, and Boynton Beach is 25 year milestone with 10 years reinspection. And Delray Beach is one that I haven't seen anything posted yet on our website. So our challenge is there's too many municipalities to track what each are doing. It's pretty challenging. So each time we do an inspection, we have to research what that municipality and what the requirements are. Using a general, again, reusing primarily what we do in Broward and Miami-Dade, which is how the whole system was started. One thing that was added, again, the intent at Surfside Working Group was to model state requirements off of what was already being done in Miami and Broward. And so some new language is added to the recertification program, which I didn't really care for. And I thought it caused a bit of confusion. And that's substantial structural deterioration. This showed up in the House bill, by the way. It wasn't in the Senate bill, it was in the House bill that eventually became the hybrid SB 4D. But again, the intent of the phase 1 was to do a cursory look, a quick look at the building. This added a little bit of change to it. It caused some confusion with the whole inspection process, in my opinion. Not all engineers, my colleagues, feel the same way, but to me, this caused confusion. And I think a lot of the people doing this work, there's not a lot of people doing restoration engineering, right? It's a specialty. And so I think a lot of people didn't see the details of it. If you're not putting proposals out and seeing the work from start to finish, this language could be a little confusing. And I try to summarize it here, and it's a little kind of difficult to articulate. But again, this was brought up in our Surfside Working Group meetings. The phase 1 was literally supposed to be exactly like the recertification program. Okay, so you go in and look at the building. Do you have repairs or not? If you don't have repairs, you pass the inspection. If you do have repairs, you got to go to this phase 2 inspection. It has nothing to do with a substantial structural deterioration. You have a phase 2, you need to look at the entire building, assess its condition, put repair specs together so they can be properly bid out, and then the work can be carried. It can be permitted, right? You need construction documents for permitting, and you can't do a repair project without specs, and you can't really do specs without a thorough assessment, which requires a phase 2. So, or a full condition assessment, right? So again, I'm trying to summarize this to you all who are just basically laymen about the details of what I do day in, day out. So the takeaway here, yes.
We have a couple questions on what you're talking about. So
Sure.
I just want to bring one of these to light. Do these statutes cover all condos or only ones based on minimum stories?
It's the municipalities cover it. I believe Miami-Dade is inclusive of more buildings. Broward is condos, to the best of my knowledge. But it does have to do with stories. It's 3 stories or more for Broward County. But that's kind of let me finish this topic here and then get back to that, okay?
No problem.
If you don't mind. Was
Thank
there
you.
another question, or was that the only one?
There are a few more questions, but if you want to
Yeah,
wrap this section, we can come back. You
let
let me
me
know when
fin
you're ready.
yeah, let me finish this because it's convoluted, but I'm trying. I put it in here because it's kind of, for me, I really didn't like this language because it changed the way changed kind of the scope of work. And I'll just try to explain here. So to carry out repairs, you need a project manual. And a recertification inspection never had a project manual involved. It was simply a quick look, do you have problems or not? But the way the new law, a phase one requires, basically is saying, okay, you need to do repairs. You don't need to do a phase two unless there's substantial structural deterioration, okay? And I kind of glanced over that language in the previous slide. This is what it says. There's a disclaimer in that paragraph that says, unless the licensed engineer or architect performing the phase one or phase two inspection determines that such surface imperfections are a sign of substantial structural deterioration. To me, this is, legal gobbledygook that doesn't, it's just confusing. And not only that, how are cracks, distortions, sagging, deflections, misalignment, signs of leaking, peeling, okay, peeling not a big deal, but all these other items could potentially be serious problems or substantial structural deterioration. So the whole paragraph is just extremely confusing. And I basically use an out with this. I say, okay, I'm the licensed engineer. I'm going to go to a phase two and do what we've been doing for decades. Okay, and just skip that goofy language. So I'll get to the takeaway and try to summarize this as quickly as possible. Right. So the end here is that you need a project manual to do repairs. In order to do a project manual, you need to do a full condition assessment, which is a phase two. So you kind of need to do a phase two one way or another if you have repairs. So that's basically it. So the takeaway to this is that what we are doing is what we've always been doing, and that is phase one is a cursory look at the building. Do you have repairs or not? And the phase two is a full condition assessment. Okay, and I use that language unless the licensed engineer performing the phase one, determines that such imperfections are a sign of substantial use. So basically, we're going right to a phase two if repairs are needed because that's the protocol. Otherwise, which I've told clients as well, is that you could go right to do a full structural assessment, a condition assessment, instead of the phase one, skip to a more thorough assessment. If you know the building has repairs, you can kind of skip that first part because it's part of the whole thing. So let me get to the questions now. I hope it confused people. I've tried to explain this to clients, and it's a kind of a difficult explanation if they're not versed from start to finish in this work. So what were the other questions?
Well, we have a lot more.
Yeah, I'm sure
That just means you're doing a great job.
yeah.
Let's see. Can a local municipal building official require additional inspection requirements over and above the milestone inspection performed by the licensed engineer slash architect?
They have jurisdiction they're not going to tell the engineer what to inspect. They're not engineers. So they're always going to default until the engineer has to do the inspection. But for instance, they can say, oh, we're going to set the milestone inspection to every 10 years. Or they can set the recertification timeline to every 7 years. So that's the type of stuff that they can control. They can't tell the engineer, though, 100% what to do. I don't think they want to get involved with that because due to liability and et cetera. Most of them aren't PEs or structural engineers. They're building officials. So,
Well, and that's interesting for this next question, which says, are the municipal inspectors qualified to check the accuracy of the
no,
inspections?
they
All
are
right.
not. For the most part, we'll get more into the construction phase of thing, but no, the inspection and stuff, they're not structural engineers and nor are the inspectors. They're typically licensed building inspectors. They're not as qualified as a structural engineer, so they don't get involved with the assessment, nor do they get involved with the construction phase much at all. And I'll get into that during that down further down in this presentation.
Do you
What
want
else
to
we
take
have?
one more or you want
Yeah,
to
we'll take
come
one
back?
more and then let's move on. There's a lot of
Okay.
stuff. Go
Uh,
ahead.
So we have in 2023, my board did all inspections, submitted a scope of work, received all permits from Pompano Beach, and began repairs to our building. The new board has undone most of that, diluted the scope of work, and canceled one of the permits. How is this allowed with all the new laws that are in place? What recourse do the owners have?
Well, welcome to condo world. I call it condo craze. It's challenging. I don't have an exact answer. I think it's a complicated question. I'd be happy to talk to this person by phone if they
Sure.
wanted to talk.
Great.
You know, I think it's too complicated to try to talk about here. I could spend an hour,
Yeah, no problem.
talking
I
about that.
appreciate that. And it sounds like Susan, who asked this question, you can contact Carmelo and you guys can chat a little bit further offline. And we will
Yeah.
do a whole condo legal update. I believe it's next week. So wait for that, guys, in the series. So thank
And,
you. We'll go back to some more of these questions later on. Thank you,
and I want
Carmelo.
to just quickly interject before Carmelo continues. Remember that whatever you hear today from Carmelo, myself, Marielle, anybody, it is not to be considered as legal advice. This is not official advice to go back to your board and say, hey, I heard at this webinar that we need to do this. If you're not sure about something, be sure to contact your counsel. Back to you, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to this person by phone. It's complicated. And one
Thank
of
you.
the main takeaway from this work is that it's over the 25 years I've been doing it, it hasn't gotten any easier. It's just as hard or harder. And I think the biggest challenge is people, is just the challenge of working with so many different people. So moving on, the takeaways, I found this whole process cumbersome as each building department has different people and this makes it more difficult. Some are really bad and not helpful. Others are great. That's the routing and paperwork, for instance. We engineers are so busy that we cannot track exactly what every municipality is doing. We must deal with each one individually. I tell you, we've had one building department locally in Broward County that's just been really difficult, not helpful. I mean, it's just impossible. So one of the takeaways in general with the stuff is just the municipalities are still difficult, So every municipality can administer the research process as they wish. It's up to the building official. Palm Beach County still seems to be getting up to speed. Again, I talked to them this morning and they sent me some docs. So they're not really readily available on their website. Like for instance, Broward or Miami have a whole page for this stuff. I had to get something sent to me directly from, somebody inside the department. So, which is, I'm not sure why they're like that, but they are. Again, Broward County already has a program set up. They've made some small tweaks, but I think it's essentially the same except for the timeline. Moving on to repairs, what's included in our phase 2 or building assessment. We have a site assessment. That's where we go out into the field and investigate the concrete, the existing structure. We use scale drawings. Sometimes we'll, take the existing drawings if they exist. If not, we'll create our own as-built drawings for the manual. We do acoustical soundings using rebar, hammer, and chain. And we have assessment sheets, again, where we quantify and note the damage. These are estimates. Again, we create project estimates for the project. That is a bid sheet. Moving on, we use acoustical soundings. I know you all have seen the putters and the bars and the hammers. And I know there's always an engineer or somebody in the building that says the engineer's an idiot. They're using, there's so much more. We're in 2024 and we're using a rebar to do a condition assessment. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. But the most common and cost-effective method of building survey is acoustical soundings, believe it or not. Okay, it identifies the location of a spall, and a spall is chipped, fragmented, loose, soft, or flaked concrete from a piece of stone or ore, which is caused by the corrosion. The takeaway from all this is a simple assessment technique is better for this work. Okay. There are other survey methods, but they don't really work for this type of work. Okay. It's not suitable to identify corrosion. Okay, it's not cost effective. So there is GPR. I've gotten in many headbutting arguments with owners that absolutely insist that GPR can be used to see through tile, etc. It doesn't work. It's a bunch of squiggly lines. I need to get a screenshot of a GPR readout, and you can't find cracks, fractured concrete with GPR. You can use it to find sinkholes, you can use it to locate rebar, but you can't use it to find fractured concrete. Okay, it's just, it doesn't work. I have a colleague that spent a lot of time trying to use it, and it doesn't work. Okay. Impact echo is another device that's used to find voids in concrete or wood, etc. It doesn't, it's not good or cost effective and useful for this type of assessment and repair. Corrosion mapping is something different. We can map out corrosion in steel, but what I've told clients is this, again, is very expensive, and it's just going to basically create more a costly project because it'll find all the corrosion that's occurring, and it's not going to be cost effective. You might use this on a bridge deck. You know, DOT might have the budget to use this on a bridge deck, you know, but you're not going to see it on private sector balconies. X-ray is one thing that might work. Okay. We have yet to use it, but recently a client asked us to get a quote for X-ray. This is just recently. I'm talking within the past couple months. And this was a 100-unit building. The balconies are 10 by 20. The company wanted $15,000 per balcony. Okay, for this project would have been $1.5 million. It would have taken 1 week per balcony or 100 weeks just to do the assessment. Okay, this is why we stick to simple rebar sounding to locate the tip of the iceberg, the corrosion, and then the damage starts from there. The destructive work starts where the corrosion is at, and then it expands out further. Okay. So more sophisticated methods do not always provide enough valuable info to warrant the extra cost. I can't tell you how much energy I've exerted in the past 5 years trying to convince not so much a board, but their unit owners that insist that they know more than everybody else. That, you know, it doesn't make any sense to use these other things. Let's just keep to it simply. Okay, let's just use acoustical sounding. So it can create a much more expensive repair project as it costs more to do the assessment, and it can uncover more areas that are not yet spalled, like a corrosion map. You might not have spalling yet, but it's going to locate all where all the corrosion is occurring. So with new requirements, it's likely we will see much more testing in the future. There is some new dynamic testing that is being used. We just did this on one of our projects. I need to get these into the slides, and that is to assess the global condition of the building. Okay. This probably will be more and more utilized in the future. Okay. So that is a very sophisticated way to check the entire global stability of the structure. And the reason I'm doing that, one of our projects is one of the challenges as engineers is as building departments want us to sign off on a building saying that the building is safe for continued occupancy. That is during a repair project and after the building or right at recertification. The challenge I have as an engineer is I can't see 90% of your building because it's covered up by drywall, kitchen cabinets, etc. Okay. Yet I'm required to sign off, not just the building envelope, but the entire building is safe for continued occupancy, which means that I have not been able to see 90% of the building. That is a lot of liability and risk. You as managers and building owners should understand and be empathic with this situation that your engineers have, whether they recognize it or not. There's serious liability with signing off on 90% of a building that they can't even see. Okay, so I am starting to utilize some additional testing to address that complexity. Okay, so I need to add some stuff to this presentation for that, but you know, that's, you know, to be continued, I guess. Moving on with this presentation, this is just an example survey sheet of one of our projects. We went in, this one, I think we had to create these ourselves. I don't believe that there were drawings for this building. So we just create something in CAD. This is a general format. And we just start noting whether we have overhead repairs, overhead edge. We've got a railing cap that's damaged. The bottom of the railing is damaged. Okay, there's another overhead repair here. And then We do this for balcony by balcony. This also occurs on walkways. And basically when this is all done, we take this in the office and we quantify the damage. Notice here that the quantities shown are field estimates and do not correspond with quantities shown in the bid sheets. Okay, so the challenge with this stuff is I got to see where the project is going to be 2 years from now today with limited information, limited access, etc. Very complicated, very difficult to do. Okay. So this leads into repair quantity estimation. It's very difficult. Determining the amount of damage that exists is one of the most difficult things to do. You can't see it. It's covered up. It's not accessible. 20 stories up, you know, on a shear wall, I have no access to it. I have to guess today what I'm going to see 2 years from now, you know, down the road. It's very difficult. Another important thing is strength and durability. Damage quantities are determined based on structural integrity and concrete longevity and durability. Okay. Why any concrete that is spalled must be removed and replaced. This is an engineering mechanics topic that is beyond the scope of this presentation. I've had, you know, plenty of owners and board members not understand why spalled concrete needs to be replaced. I'll talk about that a little bit more down the road here in this presentation. Okay. The estimate is an actual volume of concrete that requires removal and replacement is always more than what is visibly spalled. Tip of the iceberg analogy, right? You see a spalled bar of corrosion at the surface, open it up, and you've got, instead of 1 square foot, you have 10, you know, that type of thing. I know some of you all, a lot of you all probably have experience with this. We've seen it. But when we're doing our project, we have to add some kind of contingency to our field estimates. So we see a square foot in my bid sheet, I've got to say, okay, that's going to be 10 square feet or whatever ratio I feel comfortable with. It's a bit of an art. Okay. An important item too here is that this is something that's not understood by board members. These projects are primarily unit price based. Okay, it's too risky for the engineer and GC to do lump sum work in these projects because you don't know the actual quantity. You can't quantify it like you can a paint or waterproofing project. We have had problems where one contractor wanted to go lump sum on a project and it created a lot of problems. The guy actually attacked me at the end of the job because the quantities were going over what the estimate was, and he started getting mad. Meanwhile, it was his idea to go lump sum because he thought I underestimated or overestimated the quantities. At the end, we went over a little bit and he started getting upset. So it's too dangerous. Do not do unit price work on a lump sum basis. It could very easily result in a lawsuit for all parties. A successful project is one where all parties win. Going lump sum is a serious risk for major problems for everybody. I talked about the why, right? Why do these repairs, why are they required? Demand versus capacity. You know, when you start having loads of spalls, if you look at my Swiss cheese photo, I try to simplify this as best I could to a layman. But imagine every spalled piece of concrete in your slab. Imagine this a little section of your balcony, or this being a balcony, and every spall is one of these holes. Just ask yourself, would that reduce the strength of the slab? I mean, I think, you know, most people would say yes. I mean, it's common sense, right? I mean, if you got 50% voids in your concrete, is the strength of the concrete affected? Absolutely. Basically what we're talking about here with spalling and concrete damage. The capacity has to be greater than the demand. So if, you know, you have a 60 pounds per square foot capacity per building code requirements for live load, if the capacity is lowered, you know, down to 40 PSF, you need to increase or restore the integrity of that cross section back to the way it was originally designed. Okay, so quantifying this is very complicated, all right? It's extremely complex and basically impossible. It's just extremely complicated. We don't have the time or the money really either to analyze every minute. Imagine trying to model each balcony. It would be equivalent to doing the analysis with X-ray. I mean, it would literally cost you that much. In lieu of doing all that, we remove damaged, corroded areas, replace the concrete, okay? So steel cross-section loss is not uniform but scattered. Concrete degradation and breakdown can also be questionable. It's so complex and we need to simplify it by removing the concrete where areas are corroded and just replace it, okay? We need to simplify as best as possible, so that's my simple analogy there, or with the Swiss cheese. The mechanics occurring repairs is very complex, and therefore experience in structural design is the most important expertise your building engineer should have. It is something which architects or contractors have no training in or expertise typically. So again, that's complicated, and I don't want to veer too far off in that conversation. Corrosion, all walkways and balconies require waterproofing to delay or inhibit rebar corrosion. Waterproofing halts the ingress of water and chlorides from the top horizontal surfaces, thus eliminating the potential for future concrete repairs. I should say slow down the potential. Eliminating is probably too strong a word. But if the substrate holding the waterproofing is damaged, as in delaminated stucco or asphalt concrete, the substrate repairs must be made prior to the installation of waterproofing. Okay, if you need to do repairs before we put waterproofing down. But a takeaway from this slide is the corrosion does not stop, but is slowed down by waterproofing, corrosion inhibitors, etc. This is why waterproofing is so important on balconies. You want to slow down the corrosion, and do that by stopping the ingress of water and salt, basically. Do we have any questions, Mariel?
We sure do. There is some confusion and clarification that people are asking for if these if this is required for only properties 3 stories or up, or if 2 stories is still.
It depends on the municipality. Miami-Dade, I just read their update. Theirs is different. It's different than Broward. So those are things set by the municipality. Again, have that person contact me, because every municipality is doing something different. For instance, Boynton Beach does not require that. Okay. You know, the rest of the state is not requiring the 2-story requirement. It's 3 stories enough. They're requiring what the state requires. I believe for Miami-Dade, they do have the 2-story in there. My opinion, when we were in Surfside Working Group, I said 2 stories should be included. You saw the failure that happened in the beginning of this presentation. I showed you slides directly from Broward County's recertification program. Those are 2-story buildings that had a collapse, and I believe somebody died. So my opinion is if it's 2 stories, it should be done. It doesn't necessarily mean it's required in some municipalities. It depends on the municipality. They need to speak with that local municipality to find out what they're requiring. That's really it. And for Broward County, most municipalities, to the best of my knowledge, are deferring to Broward County Board's Standard 4 and Board of Rules and Appeals has a document that all municipalities, to the best of my knowledge, in Broward County, whether they're incorporated or not, are following that document. Same thing with Miami-Dade, to the best of my knowledge. Okay. Palm Beach County is different. I have to review their program. I don't believe they have 2 stories in there. It's not part of the state requirement. So that's it. But I'd be happy to talk to this person directly if needed. Yeah. Otherwise, I recommend they talk to each municipality individually, wherever they're at. If they're in county, talk to county. If they're in a town in Broward County, you know, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano, talk to that municipality directly to find out what their requirement is. That's my best recommendation.
And guys, if you're listening, if you are one of the people who asked this question, or you have a similar question, Carmelo is offering to get in touch with him directly. I mentioned that probably in the next 10 minutes, we'll put the evaluation form in the chat. Once you submit and fill out that evaluation form, you press submit, there'll be a page that populates with an opportunity to have a contact information for Carmelo's team, as well as downloadable opportunity for the presentation. So if you ask that, look out in a couple minutes. We'll put in the chat a link to the evaluation form, and you'll have access to that. Another question we have, or a couple questions like this: can a non-impact slider be put back, or does it have to be impact glass? What are your thoughts of tile on balconies?
Yeah, I talk about tiles. I have a slide specifically to that, and I'll talk about that. Impact doors, again, it's more of a municipality question. If it's impact, it should be able to be reinstalled. We are hearing some of these items, the building official has jurisdiction where he can enforce that stuff that can't be put back in. this is my challenge as an engineer. I can't know what every single building official, his guys, it's just too much. And I've been doing this for a long time. It's impossible to track. I literally have to call each one up and find out directly what are they requiring. Remember, that building official might change, right? So today it's building official A, tomorrow it's building official B who sets up new regulations based on what he thinks is important. So it's hard for me to give you exact answers on some of this stuff. It really is a question direct for the building official. Some of these things. But to answer the question, unless the door is falling apart in really bad condition, we typically are able to put it back. I mean, in my experience, I have not encountered where we've had to change all the doors, especially if they're impact. Because if they're impact, it means that they're relatively recent. They should be newer. In other words, they're not 40 years old and should have some integrity left to them. So hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Is that
And
it?
then another one
Mhm.
here, if that's okay.
Yep.
Is sprawl caused by initial poor construction, or is it a result of weather erosion over time? If it's repaired, what is the longevity of the repair?
So the spall is caused by corrosion. So the bar starts corroding with steel, reinforcing steel, and it corrodes up to 6 times its original volume due to corrosion. It puts tension in the concrete as it expands, and it blows out or spalls the concrete. And whether it's on the top of the slab, the underside of the slab, could be a column where it's doing that, horizontal instead of vertically. The code requires a couple of inches of cover to the reinforcing steel. We've seen a lot of stuff from the 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even today, okay? The problem is some of that steel doesn't have 2 inches or 1.5 inches of cover. It's got 0 cover or 1/4 of an inch. It's sitting. A lot of this happens at your door tracks. It's one of the reasons, again, why balconies are so vulnerable. They're 6 inches of concrete. You got a top and bottom mat of steel and this tiny bit of concrete, and it's so easy for that to start corroding. What happens is the steel's too close to the surface. You get cracks inevitably in concrete. Concrete cracks. It's rigid and it doesn't move. So as deflections and movement occurs, cracks occur. There's also shrinkage cracks. As those cracks occur, salt gets into those cracks, water gets into those cracks. You need water and air for corrosion, and salt just expedites the whole process. And those get in there with cracks. So that's why waterproofing is critical, to stop the ingress of salt and water to the steel, okay? So I don't know if I'm going off on tangents, but
No, I mean, we have a lot of different questions
the
here.
construction is part of it. If the steel is too close to the surface, honestly, that's typically it. Everything else is through wear and tear and typical breakdown. One thing that I learned many years ago is that, wow, you don't really realize it, but these buildings are under severe attack. You don't see it, it's invisible because it's salt primarily. The buildings on the ocean are primarily vulnerable, and the intracoastal, it's salt that's primarily the problem. Water too, right? Buildings west of 3 miles in with the statute says, they're vulnerable as well because of water, rainwater, and cracks in concrete. But salt is the big issue for coastal properties. It's a whole nother animal. So, yeah.
We certainly have more questions, but I want to let you, of
Yeah,
course, finish up,
let's
and we'll get back to some of these. I know Carmelo will hang out a little bit to answer some of these after the presentation.
let's do some more slides and then we'll circle back around with some more questions. Again, we're making decisions on actually how much to excavate. Some of it's got to do with lifespan and durability. Okay, so what ends up happening is this anodic ring. You have an electrical chemical process, and you have this anodic ring occurs where if we do a repair here, the older concrete wants to now corrode faster. The steel at the old concrete with a lower pH wants to corrode faster next to this newer concrete. So in some cases, you're better off taking out, in other words, this chunk of concrete right here in between these two repairs. By the way, this is underneath a post pocket. You see this railing, this railing post. The post allows water to get close to the steel. The steel then receives more water due to the access of water to the steel, causes corrosion, and you've got a spall. So we excavated this area, and this part right here, when they built the building, this hook bar, this slab bar, you can see it here, we cut it, but it was too close to the edge. It caused edge spall. Okay, so we did a typical full depth repair to the slab. Now we left this bit in here. I told my team, I said, get rid of this bit here. This is going to break down in a year or two, and it's not going to create our lifespan durability for the repair. So let's remove this bit here because it's going to break down. So part of the equation is structural integrity. The other part is longevity and lifespan. Okay, I get into this a little bit more in some later slides. The ICRI, the International Concrete Repair Institute, recommends that if corroded bar is found, then concrete should be removed around the rebar until 2 inches between steel is uncovered. That is basically rust chasing. Okay, so we remove concrete until we find the clean steel where there is no corrosion. That's basically a major guideline in the concrete repair world, ICRI. Okay. Tile on balconies. We had a question about this. Balconies are the most vulnerable part of a concrete building as they're exposed to water and salt on both sides, top and bottom, and the edge if you have on the edge of the slab. Tile hides damage. Okay. This is an example where this building, okay, was enclosed. This is the original sliding glass door. This was an unenclosed balcony. I'm sure there's somebody on this meeting that has an enclosed balcony. What ends up happening is this old concrete was exposed to water and salt for many years. Then you put the sliding glass door at the edge and enclose the balcony. By the way, requires a permit. This project here has a lot of units that were enclosed without permits, which is a whole nother complexity during a project. Okay. But this is an example where you have a corroded bar underneath tile. Okay, so it could hide a lot of damage. Tile should be removed without a doubt to check the condition of balcony concrete, whether it was enclosed or not. Okay, this was enclosed after the fact. So my opinion is that it would be negligent of the engineer and the board of directors to not assess the concrete underneath tile. This is an important topic, very important. I see this on a lot of jobs. Nobody wants their unit intruded into or work done inside the unit, even though this used to be outside. But again, look what this is hiding. It's hiding, corroded bar. And so at what point do you say it's okay? How much of that steel can you let go before you lose the integrity of the slab? Remember my Swiss cheese analogy. At what point am I the engineer negligent for ignoring this? And what does the board of directors have? Right? You have a fiduciary requirement to protect the building, make sure it's safe, make sure your units are safe. So be careful on this. I think there's some engineers out there, I know there are for a fact, that are ignoring tile, and they're not being thorough enough, in my opinion. To me, I feel it's negligent to not remove tile and do repairs underneath it. I started doing this work over 25 years ago, and the balconies are always the most vulnerable part. As I previously said, there's 2 layers of steel typically. I mean, it's so easy for corrosion and spalling to occur. So I can't stress enough that tile should come up and stay off. We recommend that tile be removed, the balcony be waterproof, and that's it. Keep it off. And now with the recertifications being required statewide, you're going to have to go back there 10 years later anyway and do the same process. Remove the tile, assess the condition of concrete. You're better off leaving the tile off, waterproof the balcony, okay? And that way, the next time the engineer goes out there, the spalling will reveal itself more easily. You don't have something covering it up. They can just simply tap on the slab. It'll readily reveal itself whether spalling is occurring or not. You don't have to go through the drama of taking this tile off. Okay, this is a really important topic that I think is still not. I don't think it's still completely understood locally. Okay, I think there's still a lot of confusion as to what's required. So we get to the project manual after assessment is done. I need to get a sample of my bid estimate in here, but we have bid sheets, and I'll get to that. But I usually provide, not usually, I provide a bid estimate to my clients prior to doing the project manual. So they can see generally where the project and scope is at, and then once that's approved, I move to the project manual, okay, so. It's, you know, some of it's boilerplate, some of it isn't. There's procurement information and, you know, factory repair specs and paint specs, etc. And this is just a typical bid sheet, you know, where we come up with our quantities. They're unit price based. These are all unit price based items. Okay, and that's the project. Okay, and that's all this work, all field work comes down to these units. Okay, and these are really critical because it plans out the next year or two of their work. Paint, oftentimes, not oftentimes, most of the time is a lump sum item. Once in a while, the owner does not want the building fully repainted, so we do unit price lines for paint sometimes. I have waterproofing in here and different various items that come up during a concrete repair project. I think this was a paint project, you know, so the structural repairs are a little less. We're dealing with one. I put a proposal out today, or excuse me, put a proposal out in the last week or two. Somebody had a building repainted. They didn't hire an engineer to help them out. They didn't hire an engineer to specify any stucco repairs, building envelope, concrete repairs, etc. The building was repainted. A year later, they have leaks. Carmelo, what should we do? Well, you should have had an engineer involved. You should have had the engineer put together an estimate of delaminated stucco, sealants around your windows, cracks, you know, sealing up any crack issues, etc. It's a building envelope project where you're not just the concrete repair ends up being, let's say, 10% of the project, 20%, no more than that. The rest of it is delaminated stucco, sealants, paint, etc. And you have, you know, yes, you're paying for the engineer, but in the end, is it worth you're not making, you know, making sure you have things, your envelope is sealed up right, you know? So paint projects should have an engineer a lot of times. And the reason is to address delaminated stuff in the building envelope, you know, and potentially for a lot of high rises, you have post-tension repairs, even for a newer building. These are the type of things that can come up in a project. You can see in this project, we have post-tension cable repairs, okay? So that's a bid sheet for a paint project. This is just some typical details that we put in our manual. Again, quantity estimation, we cannot know the exact quantity of damage, no matter what repair methodology is used. That is, even if we used, let's say X-ray would probably be pretty good, but anything else is still hard to estimate, right? But this is quantifying the project is very important as it sets the cost of the project, but it also is directly tied to time. This is really an important point. Okay, time and money are important. So if the quantities and costs go up, so will time. So if I underestimate the job, let's say it's a $500,000 job and I underestimate it, okay, severely, maybe the job goes to 1.5 million. Now, instead of it being a 6-month project, it's a 1.5-year project. That's a big deal for everybody. So, you know, you want to make sure your engineer, my job is to get it right on. I can't do that exactly, but I do the best I can with my experience. But so if cost estimate is too low, like I said, the board loves the engineer, right? They're going to get a second opinion. Okay, you get one engineer says it's a $500,000 job. The other one says it's 1.5 billion. They're going to hire the guy that says it's a $500,000 job. The guy's a genius, right? But during the job, then they fire the engineer, and the quantities are now $1.5 million. That's what happens in that case. This is what happens when I estimate too high. I'm too conservative. The board thinks the engineer does not know what he's doing and does not hire him or her. The engineer loses a potential job that they could have and should have had because they were probably the better engineer, but the board hires the engineer that's lower because they think that guy is smarter and knows what he's doing more, which it never works out. Okay, so this is another tricky thing to deal with. I just aim to get it right on, not too low, not too high, because of both of these complexities. Like I said earlier on, the most complicated part of this work is people, and that is the most challenging part. There's so many different people involved in the project. When we're planning for the job, we have a contingency. I always recommend 30% to add to my bid sheet. Okay, no engineer can estimate the quantities perfectly, right? That's time and money. So I put in my contingency in the bid sheets, then I tell the client to add in their own contingency when they're getting their assessment. Procurement is just the bid phase. We distribute ITBs, invitations to bid, qualified GCs, qualified, no qualified. I am very careful about who I invite to the job and reluctant to receive. Not that I'm reluctant, I'm very careful of who is bidding on the job, because a bad contractor can cause a problem for everybody, including myself, because a lot of times the engineer, since I'm the engineer, they think I'm basically doing everybody's job, and I've got to be really careful about who's the GC on the project. So we do a pre-bid meeting, we walk the site with the GC, we distribute project manuals. We receive bids in about 10 to 14 days. We open the bids, 2 to 3 GCs are shortlisted, we award, and the contractor submits a contract to the association with reviews by attorneys. And we coordinate pre-con meeting and mobilization date. I need to put a slide in here on the time frame of this. This is a lengthy process, really. The pre-bid meeting, I set it out about a week or two ahead of time. They come back with bids in 10 to 14 days. This is a month. Okay, it takes the board, from what I've seen, anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks to open the bids. Okay, it could take, I mean, it could take weeks or months for them to shortlist the GC, okay, or to select, I should say. So this process here could take a month to 3 months, okay? Then the contract, this is so with the attorneys, this could take a month or two. The attorneys could go back and forth for a month or two easily. You know, and then the pre-con meeting really isn't set until permit is obtained, so I probably should add a slide in here for that. But the permit should take 2 months, right? So this whole process here could take months, you know, it could take, you know, anywhere from the whole process start to finish could take 4 to 6 months. So it's not, it's something you got to plan out. If you want to do a project in April of 25, you kind of got to go get started on it now. This is where we do, once the permit's obtained, we do what I call CA and SI, Construction Administration and Special Inspections. Contractor mobilizes, we start marking up, whether it's with spray paint or marker. I probably need to update this slide. We use primarily paint nowadays, it's kind of old. But the contractor mobilized, they set up swings, we usually go stack by stack. We sound out the work again. Remember, we do a second sound out on these projects. So we do our initial sound out as in it's just the assessment, where we only have access to the balconies and accessible areas. And then once the project starts, the contractor stages the building and we reassess everything even more thoroughly. Okay, and we start marking it up, and that's where destructive work occurs. Contractor excavates the concrete, we go look at it, and it becomes this iterative process where they excavate, we look, they excavate further, we look, finally give them the okay to pour back, they prep the steel, form and pour. Then we move to the next stage. Special inspections, to clarify what's a special inspection and what's construction administration. There is a difference. Sometimes engineers call this all project management. I like to actually differentiate it by calling it special inspections, which takes the place of the floor of the building department, right? We basically are the building department on these jobs to a certain extent. So SIs are required by Florida statutes. Due to inaccessible nature of restoration projects, building departments will not access the swings and therefore do not perform special inspections. It is the engineer's scope of work to be the inspector of the project in the place of the authority having jurisdiction. Not all engineers doing resto work are licensed SIs. Basically, I got a couple takeaways. The word inspection means more than common person might think or know. This task makes up 50% of what an engineer does during the construction phase. The engineer is taking the place of the building department, but still submits weekly reports to the building department. So the building department is still involved. They administer the project, but they don't come to the site and do inspections. They usually just stop by once a month and pick up the reports, our reports, the engineer's reports. That's generally that. Concrete testing is one important part of our, projects, we require that on all trucks, all ready-mix trucks, which in this case, this example, these photos are from a ready-mix truck. Sometimes we use bag mix. We also require testing on those for kind of like a CYA thing, just to protect ourselves and the owner. We make sure the back products are structurally strong or sufficient. I put this slide in here some years ago. One of the board members did not understand what my role was on the job. That's why I specifically state what the role is. We're not a construction manager. We're a construction administrator. Okay, it's different. Construction management holds a permit. We don't hold a permit. Okay, the contractor does. So the engineer's role in the rest of the projects is CA, but not construction management. Okay, and this includes weekly meetings with the contractor, manager, board members, reviewing materials, reviewing the contractor's work, monitoring quality work, reviewing, approving, rejecting, commenting on submittals, etc. I want to add that this is often a role that project managers do. What we do, the way I run jobs, is basically like what a project manager is, project management plus, perhaps you could say, right? So I'm providing special inspections, CA, which is a project manager's role to a certain degree. So we're doing all of that for the price of an engineer only, not a project manager. My opinion with project managers is that's a little bit of a waste of money. And I'd be happy to talk to you further about that if you want to speak to me directly. Again, part of CA is tracking quantities of all completed work, reviewing, approving, rejecting, again, pay applications, change orders. We serve as a liaison between the board and the contractor, and we assist with resolution of problems as they arise during construction. This is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Contractors responsible for means, methods, techniques, sequences, the schedule that is, and procedures. Takeaway, the engineer is most often administers a construction contract, but it's not the construction manager. The GC is solely responsible for means, methods, and the schedule. So that's something that comes up on every job. Everybody wants to tell the contractor how to do, where to put his swings, how to do his work. But in reality, my contract with the owner is I am not responsible for the schedule. I can't be as the engineer. And the contract between the owner and the contractor specifically says they're responsible for means, methods, techniques, sequences, procedures. So technically, I can't be telling the contractor how to run his job, and the board shouldn't be telling the contractor how to run his job either. It's solely the contractor's responsibility. Again, I'd be happy. It's another deep, you could talk for a long time about this based on experience, so again, just to summarize, I guess, the CA versus SI. CA, we coordinate and oversee meetings, quantity tracking, pay application, and change order work. This is strictly CA aspect of things. The SI, I'd like to separate the two because I'm a licensed special inspector. It's a big deal. There's a few hundred licensed SIs in the state. So it's a big deal. I think it's overlooked a lot of times as to what our actual role is on these jobs. The engineer has a lot of responsibility. But if the SI, you might say, the assessing the condition of the concrete, that's SI, okay? Assessing the structural capacity of the concrete, that's structural engineering, okay? Then special inspection. Checking the rebar condition, rebar cleaning, excavation extents, concrete pours, that's all inspectional, okay? It's not CA. So these things are differentiated. Right? There's different things. We're 6 minutes over. Marielle, do you want to take some more questions at the moment?
We have a bunch of questions, if it's a good time
Sure.
to do that. Great. And I just want to remind everybody that Carmelo has made himself available to get in touch with him and connect with him after this. So if you go ahead and fill out that evaluation, once submitted, his contact information for his team will pop up. I know a lot of you guys are trying at once, so if you're having trouble, just wait a few minutes and try to submit again. All right. We have a few questions about tile on balconies and kind of your recommendation. Should we just not allow tile on balconies, or does all the tile have to be removed to evaluate a balcony? What's your take?
Both. I don't recommend putting tiles back on balconies, and I recommend you take the tiles off to do the assessment. You cannot see through the tile. The only thing that can really see through the tile is X-ray, and I gave you the example that it's just too costly and time consuming. The only thing you should do is remove the tile, keep the tile off, especially if it's an exposed balcony. keep the tile off the balcony. Just waterproof it, make it part of your bylaws, or keep the tile off. That's the simplest and easiest answer. Do not put tile back on the balconies. Do the structural repairs, waterproof, leave the tile off. Don't put it back.
So next we have one, during a condo purchase with visible concrete issues, who and when gets a copy of a report?
Not
Or
sure.
report.
Not sure about that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, that's really a conversation between that person and management.
Yeah.
But it seems like if they're buying something, then that should be readily, any work that's going on should be readily available to the buyer, I would think. Yeah. So,
Wonderful. Let's see, we have phase 1 is a cursory visual inspection. Does a visual inspection include tap or knocking test on all balconies?
not necessarily. We sometimes, we do a cursory acoustical sounding. That is, we don't really we don't mark down on those sheets I showed you, the balcony sheets. We don't put information down as to the area. It's just a look to see, do you have problems or do you not? And so we do, in some cases, bring our putter along or a hammer to sound out, a quick look to see if there's some spalling, but it's not as thorough as a phase 2, So a phase 1 can include some acoustical work. It depends on the engineer, But yeah.
So another one kind of, similar about the phases is what you're saying is practically it will always be a phase 2 inspection if there are any surface cracks or spalling.
That is kind of, see, the challenge I've had to try to articulate it to management and owners is that you can't do the work without a project manual. So there's a couple of different things. You need to put like a flow chart together to help convey the point.
I like that idea.
Yeah. You can't put a project together unless you do the whole building. In other words, how could I possibly quantify the damage in a building if I don't assess as much as I possibly can? You can't. You don't do, that's why you don't do it during a typical phase 1. You've got to look at every balcony to put a proper quantity assessment together. Yes, there are times when in cases where condos have and engineers have only done 30% of the building and then extrapolated that data out. Okay, it's still a different assessment though. It's still a different type of assessment. It's a phase 1 recertification assessment is different than a phase 2 structural condition assessment. Notice what I'm calling them. A phase 1 is it's just language, but it's just a recertification inspection that we've been doing in Miami since the 70s. And Broward County since 2005. Nothing's changed. You're not doing a more thorough condition assessment where you're quantifying damage. Okay, so again, this might be somebody that's welcome to email me or call me, and I'll be happy to explain it further. But I do tell clients, and I've with total transparency, I've lost jobs in the past because I would tell the client, you've got a 40-year-old building. Why don't you skip the recertification inspection? Let's do a full condition assessment. Okay. Even though you're up, this is going back, let's say 10, 15 years. I can't remember, but there was one particular case where I proposed to a condo to do a full, look at each balcony. They were up for the recertification. Let me look at each of your balconies. Let me put together a full scope of work. That makes more sense than to do a recertification inspection when we already know you have problems that need repairs. No, we don't want to do that. They basically hired somebody else for $1,500 to inspect a 10-story, 100-unit building, which I don't know, what exactly they're getting for that. Okay, how much can an engineer do for such a small amount of money? And basically, what they got was you need to still go back in and do that full assessment and look at all the balconies. So what I'm trying to convey is there are some cases, and I told somebody this recently, you're better off if you have problems and you haven't done repairs in 20 years, you don't just go right to a phase 2. It's a structural condition assessment. So you basically, you're knocking out 2 things with 1 stone, if you will. I mean, I don't know if that one might kill birds, but but you know that analogy, right? So, it's one of those things where sometimes it may make more sense to do the full condition assessment, quantify the damage, use that to recertify the building, and skip the phase one. You know, I have told clients that. Yeah. Hopefully, I summarized that properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We have, I think this one is kind of interesting. If someone hoses down their balcony with water daily, will that destroy the integrity of the cement and cause it to corrode? And my kind of add-on is are there other daily activities or regular things that people are doing to potentially destroy the integrity of the cement?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, what does it make a difference? Probably over 10 years, and you have one, if you did, it'd be an interesting, study. If you did one balcony, somebody, watered down every day, and then the adjacent balcony was dry or just received rainwater. I would venture to say that, yeah, absolutely, that balcony is probably gonna have more damage because it's just staying wet or more. It just has more water on it. So it's possible. Yeah, I don't have an exact answer on that, but I would think it would cause more damage. Yeah.
When your company does an engineering assessment, do you make a report and then the customer must go out and get quotes for contractors to do the repairs, or do you do the repairs as well?
Again, no, we don't. No, we don't do the repairs. We are engineers. My opinion is that you don't want to don't hire a engineer / contractor. That is, in my opinion, a huge conflict of interest. Primarily because, does the state allow it? It actually does. I'm actually a licensed GC, so I know, I've looked it up. The state does allow it as long as the board or the owner is aware of the conflict. The problem is that with this unit price work, he's creating his own work. So he's setting the scope of work. If you look at this photo here, right, that I have up on the screen, I'll get into why this is here, okay? But this unit, the guy that's doing his own work can set the quantity of work that he wants to do. Instead of doing, taking out half of this balcony of concrete, he can say, okay, I want to take it all out. So he can create his own scope of work and basically has free reins on how much money he's going to spend on the job. You don't want the engineer and a contractor being the same entity, nor do you want the contractor hiring the inspector. That also is a conflict of interest. Now, the contractor is controlling the engineer on what he's just deciding he should do. That's a big no-no. You don't have a tri-party relationship there as well. I mean, when you have a true, like an AIA contract has an owner, a contractor, and an engineer, a tri-party relationship. You don't have that with a situation where the engineer is hired by the contractor. This typically happens on buildings where the people are just, the owners are really clueless on legality and other things. So I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Makes sense. No, I think this is actually very interesting and very helpful for a lot of people. We don't talk too much about that, so thank you for that one. And I think there's one last question to kind of wrap it up, because there's a couple people who have questions about back to the tile on the balconies. But is there an alternative? And is porcelain tile with an epoxy grout okay? What kind of products can be used for balconies that make it look like tile? A couple questions.
Okay. Yeah, so we typically use a cementitious topping on top of waterproofing. That definitely can be made to look like tile. We have one project right now where it's a higher end building, and they're willing to spend thousands of dollars. Well, let's see, some of the tile patterns are $30 per square foot, and some are, I think the basic spray deck charge is $3 to $4 a foot, and anything beyond that is an upcharge. And so to answer the question, yes, you can use a spray deck with tile pattern. I don't recommend any kind of tile. And again, the reason is it hides spalling. And so that in order for 10 years from now, after you spend all those millions of dollars of repair work, you're gonna have to do it all over again. Take the tile up so the engineer can properly assess the condition of the concrete. So don't put tile on balconies. It's that simple. Just leave it off. Just leave off the tile, use waterproofing and a cementitious spray deck. That's my recommendation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I know a couple of you guys have questions about the presentation, the slides, where you can see the recording. I just want to review that one more time before we head out. In the chat function at the very bottom of your Zoom interface, you will see a couple links that we put into the chat. One from Jeff Solomon is ACE by TSK, July 17th, concrete restoration. It's the evaluation form. Go ahead and fill that out. And upon submission of this form, a page will appear. Jeff will show us in just a second. A page will appear that looks like this. Here you'll have a contact for United Professional Engineering, which again, Carmelo has generously offered himself to connect with you guys. I know we did not get through all the questions. You had so many great questions, and there's a lot of nuance to this topic. So please connect with his team, and they're offering to get into some of these details. You'll also have an opportunity to download the presentation, which I know a lot of you guys are asking for. Even more so, you will be able to watch the recording of this session in case you want to refer back or you want to send it to a colleague, you want to send it to your community on the ACE by TSK website under our resources section. And you not only will be able to see this webinar, but you'll have recordings of all the webinars as well as a lot of our in-person events. You have a lot of amazing information on this resource center, so I encourage you to take advantage of it. Last but not least, you have our webinar page, which will show you our upcoming webinars, and you can RSVP right now for the ones that you are most interested in. This webinar series will run all summer, all the way through mid-September. So every single Wednesday, you guys can join us and learn with us. And engage with the community. So we really, really appreciate a fantastic presentation today from Carmelo. A lot of amazing information. Thank you for answering questions. And please take advantage of his offer to connect with him and chat further about some of these really important issues and information. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We're going to leave this up just so that you can grab the evaluation form if you haven't done so already. That is where you'll find the downloadable slides, the contact information, all the things that you guys need post-webinar.
Correct.
Jeff?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, first of all, yes, but Carmelo, excellent. It was great to see you. It's been a long time. Great job, as always.
Great job.
Thank you so
We
much.
had some comments to that effect as well, so we really appreciate that.
And Carmelo, we'll make sure we get you all of the unanswered questions. We'll send you a full report on everything that was submitted, both answered and unanswered, as well as anybody asking for contact from United Professional Engineering. We're going to have a lot of them, I presume. So
Thank you.
We'll get it to you. Thanks again. And I know you have appointments and things to do. Marielle and I are going to hang out here for a minute. The chat is open. So that you can send us technical questions about the evaluation if it's not functioning properly, questions about what's coming up. And I'll go over that one more time with your permission, ladies and gentlemen. Is that okay?
Yes, please. And Carmelo, we have a lot of thank yous. This was a great presentation. Thank you for the presentation. So I think we have some great feedback. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Carmelo, before you go, let's say you don't work in a certain area for geographically. And Association X hires engineering company X because you're not in that area. Can they also hire you or take you on to oversee that project to make sure they're not getting screwed?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm open to, discussions. We just put a, remote office down in Tavernier, down the Keys, and we're looking at some other areas around Florida. And, so to answer your question, yes.
Awesome. And that's a wonderful thing to do. As a former, I at one point managed a large scale community, and I would regularly hire service providers, not to do the work, but to oversee peers and colleagues that are doing the work to make sure we don't end up having to spend even more money later on. So that's another great option that Carmelo and his team can offer you guys. So keep that in mind. It's a wonderful option that they are able to do that. So Carmelo, once again, thanks so much.